Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the factions of the Warhammer 40K universe. As such, let us explore the...
Hear me!
Yes, Archimedes? How pleasant of you to pop by. How are you?
Don't give me no that rubbish. What you doing?
I was just going to explain more about the time you live in to the people of my period.
But you've missed out on our bogey flicking contest. Forget that now, though. What you doing? What you telling them now, then?
Yes, sorry for missing that. What is it now? 200 victories to 0 to you, of course. I just can't seem to get the flick action down. You're so brilliant at it.
Don't change the subject, hear me? Answer the question, or I will whip off your arms and clap you to death with the wet bits.
I was going to start discussing the Eldar Civil War.
No, you ain't. Enough about the knife ears. You want to tell them humans about war? War? You's doing the Orks then. Like I told you, Baldermort, do it proper. Like I told you, or else.
I loved that door. Also the wall around it. Oh well, here goes then. Welcome, gentle listener, to the secret history of the Sleeping Dragon. The most dangerous, most successful, and most populous race in the Warhammer 40K universe. Welcome to the secret history of the Orks. To quote, I've got to know a great deal more about these creatures over the last century or so. Since that first disconcerting encounter, the one thing I've seen time and again is that dismissing them as simple, unreasoning brutes is a fast route to the graveyard. Or more likely, their stomachs. Commissar Caiaphas Cain. The Orks plague the galaxy from end to end with their ceaseless warring and strife, and they are a race rooted so deeply in war that peace is utterly incomprehensible to them. They cannot be bargained with or bought, save with weapons that they will inevitably turn against those who tried to bribe them. I pray with all my faith that some great catastrophe will annihilate them. And I fear that ultimately it is they, not we, who shall rule the galaxy. Xanthias, High Lord of Terror. End quote. The Orks. It is easy for many to think that they know what an Ork is, as the name and imagery is so prolific in fantasy and many sci-fi movies, books and even comics. But this is simply not true. The Orks of Warhammer 40K have developed far beyond their grassroots history of being shallow clones of the great Professor Tolkien's imaginings. To Tolkien, the Ork was a twisted elf or other creature mutilated by the Dark Lord Morgoth. But the Orks of Warhammer have, over some 30 years or more, been truly honed into a separate and distinct entity. So you must unlearn what you have learned, as another little green friend might say. Welcome to the Warhammer 40K Secret History of the Orks. I hope for this guide to entertain the old hand and update the newly initiated player. For there is one universal truth that cannot be ignored or detracted from. There is no player happier than an Ork player, as there is no race happier than the Orks. Now, when I say happy, I do not mean the kind of sitting on the porch, slowly drinking lemonade happy. No. I mean the heady, exhilarated happy of being in a 200-car smash-up, being the only person to walk out alive. The kind of happy where everything you ever wanted is given to you every day for the rest of your life. For this is exactly the situation the Orks are in, and, in their estimation, it is only getting better by the day. The Warhammer 40k universe is called the Grimdark, and for most of its denizens this is soul-crushingly true. But the byline is also, there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And this suits the Orks down to the ground. For without exception, there is no time an Ork is happier than when he is charging a fortification, crumping humies, or brawling with a foe twice its size. For the Orks, war is not a task, a duty, a sacrifice, or a trial. War is their reason to live, and it is one they absolutely thrive on. War to orcs is like air to any other race. They require it for their survival, like the ultimate paragons of Darwinianism that they are. Without war and conflict, an orc starts to become lessened and will eventually waste away, like an ardently loyal hound who has lost his master. Orcs that have been taken into captivity and been prevented from fighting have lost muscle mass, have become lethargic, despondent, and eventually died. It is their way, and it is how they were intended to be by their creators. By this, I do not mean some ephemeral, mythic deity, for the orc and other races were created at the dawn of the Warhammer 40K universe by a race, or races, collectively known as the Old Ones. The Orks, or Krork, were engineered, built, trained, equipped, and used for only one purpose: war. By the end of this video, you will know what an orc is, how they operate, and possibly most importantly of all, why they should indeed hate the Eldar, who have betrayed them time and time again, and why they are absolutely fundamental to the survival of the galaxy in its entirety. We should also be discussing the lies that have been foisted on the galaxy by the Eldar, changing the perceptions of all to the orcs, but also the entirety of history, but not that it bothers the orcs one whit, for they simply do not care what anyone thinks of them, ever. Before we get on to the history of the orc, let us explore, very swiftly, their basic biology. But we will be brief, as I intend to cover all of these issues again in the future, in far more comprehensive and specific videos. It is important, though, to know so we can understand the green skin properly. Orcish Physiology. To quote, "Orc physiology is fascinating and terrifying in equal measure, demonstrating inhuman degrees of resilience to the point where they can withstand seemingly fatal wounds with little apparent long-term consequences. Indeed, orcs witness suffering fatal wounds in the midst of heavy fighting have often been observed several days later, larger and stronger than they were before their injuries, and with no sign of those injuries save for some largely superficial scarring." Genitor Aurelius Thors, Adeptus Mechanicus, xenobiologist. The orcs are the pinnacle of creation. For them the great struggle is won. They have evolved a society which knows no stress or angst. Who are we to judge them? We Eldar who have failed, or the humans on the road to ruin in their turn? And why? Because we sought answers to questions that an orc wouldn't even bother to ask. We see a culture that is strong, and despise it as crude. From Culture vs. Culture, Thoughts on Orcish Society by Uthan, the perverse, controversial Eldar philosopher. End quote. What is an orc? Huge, green-skinned simian in appearance, with long arms that almost reach ground due to its hunched gait, the orc is a terrifying mountain of muscle and sinew that, when standing erect, can be 8 feet tall or taller. And that is the standard orc, not the larger specimens who have grown due to their rank. Orcs are not actually simple animals, and do not have reproductive organs, for the orc is in fact a gestalt between animal and fungi life forms. The form is incredibly simple, and nervous system barely above functional. They can manipulate fine detailed equipment, use tools, and even craft, but their senses do not reach all of the usual places that are found in most sentient beings. As such, orcs cannot feel anything a human would define as pain, unless they are dealt wounds that would do catastrophic damage to them. Their resilience has been marvelled at by human and Eldar alike, for it is said that if an orc is decapitated, then its body and head can survive for some time. Worse still, should the orc head be reattached to its body, or even that of another orc, that they can then continue to function after what other races would consider a brief breather. Orcs are incredibly strong, even for their size, and are noted to have reflexes that are surprisingly fast for something of its bulk. Time and time again, the assumptions that the orc is slow due to its size has been the last mistake a sentient has ever made. Orcs are asexual. Their method of reproduction is very simple. Again, they are fungi. They produce spores. During an orc's adult life, they regularly give off spores that will then gestate and become more orcoids, or orcs themselves. This happens regularly. When an orc dies, its body gives off the largest amount of spores. Thus it is that any planet that is invaded by the orc is inevitably doomed. Unless every last one is incinerated with fire or weapons that destroy all airborne contaminants, like spores, the race of orcs will rise again and again, most often stronger with each generation of their kind. In this way, it can be affirmed that if every single orc and all other orcites dropped dead all at once, and to the very least unlast, their story would still not be over. They would rise again to engage in their never-ending wars. No other race known to this galaxy can make such an outlandish-sounding claim. But to the orcs, death is just a way to infect the world with even more orcs. Nor does war stop this cycle, it only enhances it. Any other race that has sustained casualties will eventually drop to a level where the continuation of the race would be in question. With the orcs, the more that die, the more orcs there will be in a frighteningly short time. For orcs mature incredibly fast, and one generation in human, Tau or Eldar would permit hundreds of generations of orcs. So to effectively reduce their numbers, for one cannot wipe them out, is no small task, and one that must be done regularly, frequently, and with escalating force and forces. But the orc itself is only the pinnacle of the pyramid of the orcoid races, each combined to make the orcs a terrifyingly self-sufficient race, as they were designed to be. When an orc dies, it gives off spores, as we know, but those spores react with the environment as the needs of orc society require. If there are plentiful orcs, then orcs will be grown, but if not, like on a newly landed planet, then the process leads to what I like to call the hierarchy of havoc. In a virgin environment, the very first thing that will grow out of the fungal blooms and the ground are what is known as skwiggs. Skwiggs are simple creatures that serve two fundamental functions in the growth of an orc colony. 1. They are food for the developing orcoids. 2. They are akin to watchdogs, guarding the encampments and gathering places of the orcs. Skwiggs vary in sizes, but are roughly akin to a very angry bull with legs, and a huge maw in its centre that is ringed by enough teeth to make a shark green with envy. Pun intended. The smallest might equate to a football or soccer ball. The larger specimens could easily dwarf a human. Once there is a plentiful abundance of skwiggs, the process continues, and the next thing to be developed are the snotlings. Snotlings are very small and can be best described as similar to evil fairies of European legend. Small and green with long distended pointed ears, generally hairless, and of a vicious nature. The snotling's main role is to herd and manage the skwiggs. They are semi-sentient but not intelligent as a human might mean. Think of them as small children, like gremlins, with a sense of humour that runs to brutal and a penchant for evil. But inexorably, they are not dangerous to most, as they are without the ability to organise the fight in any meaningful way. Once enough snotlings and skwiggs are abound, then the next orcoid to be issued up by the ground is the Gretchen, often known as grots. Gretchen are what most would call goblins. Smaller and weaker than proper orcs, they are cowardly and vicious, but dangerous nonetheless. Grots act as aids to the orcs, carrying equipment, weaponry, and other material for the combatant line warriors, the orcs themselves. They are beaten and even eaten by orcs when need or punishment require. The life of a grot is insanely dangerous, dealing with the bellicose orcs at every turn, but the grots thrive. Only once has a grot rebellion met with any success, but that story is for another time. Finally, when their simplistic society is ready, proper orcs appear. Orcs are born with a natural affinity for combat, violence, and almost instant activity. They are one of the purest forms of being in the galaxy, as their every asset is designed to perform their main task: war. The orcs are also different from their precursors in one fundamental way. They have more access to the genetic memory and automatically ingenious strains within their makeup. The standard orc of the line, so to put it, is called a boy. Collectively, they are called boys. That's B-O-Y-Z, not B-O-I-S, everyone. When there are enough orcs in any place, then random orcs will begin to develop traits and skills that they had absolutely no training or assistance in learning. These orcs are generally dubbed odd boys. They fill out all of the usual specifications that any civilization would generate. Odd boys can be mechanics, mech boys, doctors, and I am using that in the broadest possible way, called Pain Boys, or even Psychers, called Weird Boys. Their creators, the Old Ones, managed to write into their very DNA these specializations that are impossible to be replicated by experience. The troubling thing for all of the adversaries of the Orks is that these abilities also grow exponentially with the number of Orks that are present. A small tribe of Orks might have a mech boy who can just pick up pieces of metal and bash them into a form of a weapon. A mech boy in the midst of a great gathering of millions of Orks will have potentials unlocked within them, and literally anything is then possible. It was Ork technology that created the attack moons of the era of the Beast that travelled via a type of teleportation the Imperium has never been able to fully understand or replicate. The larger the gathering of Orks in one place, the smarter or more proficient and powerful these specialist Orks, odd boys, become. This is due to a type of field that the Orks give off as a race. They call it War energy. It is a form of psychic gestalt power, like a species subconscious, that enhances the Orks when more of it is present in one place. It is also the method by which the mech boys generate impossible weapons and technology. The Orks' psychic power fuels their weaponry, their transports, and all of their equipment. This is devastating, as it means that anything that is developed by the Orks cannot be reverse engineered, and no logical counters will work on their technology with any certainty or regularity. Simply put, the Orks as a race have but to believe something hard enough, with enough of them, and that thing will become true. If enough of them believe a heap of scrap has been hammered together by a mech boy will take them off planet on a crusade-like war, then fly it will. This extends to other spectra as well. If Orks believe that painting their vehicles red will make them faster, then faster they will be. It is very similar to the Eldar way of powering their vehicles and some weaponry, but with no training, restraint, knowledge or experience required whatsoever. Orks do not harness the power of the warp as Eldar do. They simply do and expect the universe to change to their beliefs, which, horrifyingly, it does as long as enough Orks believe it. Their psychers, the weird boys, are not like elegant masters of mysteries or wizards moulding reality to their whim by knowledge and the application of power. No. Weird boys are Orks attuned to the War energy that is generated by their fellow Orks, but I shall go into the odd boys at another time. Simply know, for now, that they are more like a hose that funnels and shoots out the War energy at whatever they are pointed at. But what they do not have in skill or control, they more than make up for in sheer unadulterated power. Weird boys are able to channel truly terrifying amounts of energy and wreak unparalleled carnage in the ranks of their enemies. But, by the same token, they are just as prone to overfill with the same energy, and then their heads might explode, which is often seen as hilarious by any who survive and witness the scenario. War energy has many applications that benefit the Ork. Its concentration unlocks these specialist genes and abilities, but more than this. The war energy infuses their leaders and also calls out to other Orks. When an Ork gathering gets to a certain critical mass, it starts to throw off a psychic calling, a raising of the Ork banner on a psychic level that cannot be blocked or truly measured. This beacon-like effect will draw more and more Orks to the gathering until it is then unleashed in what the Orks call a war. Part crusade, but all rampage, the war does not have set goals or conditions. It simply denotes that a massive war party is about to set off in a direction and conquer and fight, all in their path. The strange biology of the Orks also means that a leader's size, strength, cunning and even intelligence grows as more and more Ork boys and warbands join the war. This is a perfect form of governance for the Orks, as they are quintessentially Darwinian. Any leader can and will be challenged the second they show weakness, incompetence or any un-Orky behaviour, or simply if another Ork believes that they are stronger or more skilled. In this way, the most aggressive and skilled warriors amongst the Orks rise swiftly to the top, and then grow to match the size of their war. Insolence or disobedience are met head-on, and instantly quashed by the chief killing any challengers as they arise. The chief known as a war boss. If the war boss is smart enough, this can happen before that stage even occurs. But few choose to do this, even if they know of an attempted coup, as they truly relish the thought of a good fight and to display their superiority to prevent further insurrection from their iron-like rule. Thus, the more orcs there are, the more will arrive, and the more victories they gain, the more will arrive, and the more they die, the more will infest the planet. Fighting orcs is truly a no-win situation for most cultures, as even if they win the battle, they will inevitably lose the war. The largest war boss, or orc leader, to arise in the Warhammer 40K period was during the rise of the Beast. This orc was said to be able to communicate in clear Gothic, the language of the Imperium, and to formulate plans and strategies that were on a par with a Primarch's ability. It is also the pathway to that state of being that is now lost to the orcs, but perhaps for not much longer. For if an orc can gain the following and power that the Beast had in circa Millennium 33, and maintain it or even exceed it, then the road to the evolution again of the orcs into the Krork could well occur. But we will get to that in a moment. Thus, orcs have no use for civilization or any of its trappings, as they simply do not need them. The entire point of civilization is to protect the individual and to improve the lot of those within it. Every civilization springs from abundance, as a milestone is reached and new ways of gaining essentials are developed. As soon as there is a surplus of food via agriculture or animal husbandry, then some of the individuals can then concentrate on other endeavours. This is usually the creation of improvement of dwelling places. As soon as food and shelter are provided in abundance, then other essentials are developed, like improved ways or tools for hunting, animal husbandry, or again, agriculture. When this has been done, more essentials are met, like container making and the like, so more food can be stored effectively. Only when these stages have occurred do sentient beings then develop such things as poetry, philosophy, art, science, and eventually statecraft. Orcs do not need any of these things. Their food is the Skwiggs, or, in times of desperation, the Snot Rings or grots. Well, also in times of entertainment. They are utterly self-sufficient, nor do they require the specializations to be developed over an elongated time frame due to the genetic gifts hard-written into their very DNA by the Old Ones. Orcs simply do not need to take thousands of years reinventing the wheel every time they rise anew, as this knowledge is coursing through their veins, simply awaiting the conditions to activate the necessary awareness as bequeathed to them by the Old Ones. I hope you can now see that although many call the orcs the comedy relief of the grim darkness of Warhammer 40k, they are nothing to laugh about, not in the slightest. Now that we know the very basics of what an orc is, let us explore their genesis, their creation. I hope the experienced player finds this eye-opening, and the initiate to this glorious setting educational. For the race of orcs is one of the oldest in the galaxy. Their creation, which it most certainly was, occurred in a period of the galaxy known as the War in Heaven. This tracks back to at least 65 million years ago, and could potentially be many millions of years longer. The march of time has made anything from this period myth or legend, with little or no extant evidence remaining, with one huge exception only: the Necrons. The very brief version, as I will cover this in detail in the future, is that millions of years ago there was a war between two superpowers amongst the stars of the Milky Way galaxy. One faction was the beneficent and wise Old Ones, who were mighty psychers and wise beyond the dreams of the present era. These Old Ones were akin to cosmic gardeners who would plant races and the seeds of greatness and development of sentient life far and wide in the Milky Way. Their mastery of the psychic plane allowed them to create the webway and to transport themselves through unfathomable distances in an instant. They helped and nurtured the younger races and gave freely in that time. Their opponents were the Necron, a race of tortured souls who had been developed on a world with a faulty and twisted sun that shredded their DNA and made their every moment an agony to be endured, rather than a life to be cherished. Simply put, the Necron became envious of the Old Ones and their longevity, almost to the levels of immortality in the Necron eyes, and then declared war on them. The war went badly for the Necron at first, for the Old Ones used their vast psychic abilities to predict where they would strike, and then outmaneuvered them via the use of the webway to transport overwhelming force to every engagement. The Necrontyr went down to the dust and were forced back to the fringes of the galaxy, back to their home world. And all seemed well for a time, but it was not to last. The Necrontyr discovered that their sun was actually being slowly devoured by a creature the likes they had never encountered before. The Necrontyr science was strong, and they eventually made contact with the being they were later to call the Catan, in Necrontyr meaning star gods. The Catan told the Necrontyr of how they had made war on the Old Ones, but, like the Necrontyr, they had been defeated. Thus the two races, the Catan and the Necrontyr, formed a pact. The Catan would grant the Necrontyr immortality and then lead them into a war against the Old Ones to gain revenge. The deal did not go as it was sold to them, and the Necrontyr did indeed gain immortality, but only at the cost of their very souls. They were now beings of metal and did not fear death and did not experience pain or suffering, and all that remained of their drive was to make war on the Old Ones. The Old Ones were no match for the combined power of the Catan and the legions of the metallic undead Necrons. This confrontation is called the War in Heaven now. It is unknown what exactly occurred, or how long it was fought for. Some say it could have been millions of years, due to the next set of events that are known. The Old Ones turned to their genetic manipulations out of desperation. They grew and developed races that they hoped would aid them in the war against the Catan and the Necrons. For this is the most terrible war to ever have occurred in the history of the Milky Way galaxy, and its horrors and wonders cannot even be described by those who exist today. Entire star clusters were winked out of existence. Wormhole weapons and mass extinctions of huge swathes of the galaxy were perpetrated by both sides. It was hell made manifest. Accepted wisdom states that there were 5 main races that survived the War in Heaven, some only barely. The Jakero, the Knib, the Rashan, the Eldar, and the Krork. Many believed that they were of an age with each other and grown at the same time as one another. Accepted wisdom also states the Old Ones were defeated and they were slain by the Catan while the Necrons burnt and killed all in their path. All of the Old Ones died, save one. The two armies together could not be beaten, despite the best efforts of the Old Ones to raise their own races as aids. The accepted wisdom then goes on to state that the war was ended and the Catan fell on one another in cabalistic orgies of destruction and power. When they had all but expended themselves on their infighting, the Necrontyrs struck, finally turning on them and shattering them into multitudes of shards and enslaving the Catan and using them then as weapons. When this was done, the Necrons looked around and measured themselves to the strength of the Eldar. After the War in Heaven and their rebellion against their Catan masters, the Necrons were spent and decided that instead of fighting the Eldar, and very likely losing, they would go into slumber in stasis vaults and simply attempt to outlast the Eldar. Hence they went to sleep in their time-proof stasis vaults, and did indeed slumber until their awakening in the present era of the Imperium. The Krork were ravaged by a plague of psychic entities called enslavers that had been a factor in bringing down the Old Ones, and the Krork were near destroyed, along with the Knib Rashan. The Eldar avoided this plague by retreating into the webway for a time, but the plague of the enslaver entities could not go. The Krork numbers fell so much, their energies depleted to nadirs never before experienced. Then the Quarks devolved into the Orks, a shadow of their former glory and power, from which they would never recover. This is a tragically brief recounting for such monumental events, which I will cover in more detail at another time, but it is fundamental to the history of the Krork and your knowledge of them. For now, we need to discuss the true history of the Krork and Orks. Jakero are a race that show the origins of the Krork in the War in Heaven. They too are very ape-like. They resemble Terran orangutans and have the innate ability to modify and innovate in regards to technology. Their abilities were genetic as well, but instead of using psychic energy or war power to charge their weaponry and gadgets, they used pure science. A Jacaro artifact would work in the hands of anyone and by the standard laws of physics. Hence anything they made could be reverse engineered by a technologically advanced adversary, and the Necrons were nothing if not very technologically advanced. The Knib. 10 limbs and festering, possible warrior beasts that were successful enough to survive the war in heaven, but not enough to turn the tide against the Necrons. The Rashan, where even less is known. Only one instance of their activity is known to have occurred with the Imperium, of the Grim Darkness, and there are scant details concerning this race and ancient power. But what does this all show? What has this to do with the Krork? So, the inherent technological innovation gene has been used before, but the Jacaro seem to have ultimately failed the test of the Old Ones, as they were replaced by a better tool. Jacaro, if they are the same now as they were in the War in Heaven, are not an aggressive or organised race, and only move in tribal groups and communication is not truly identified. No human knows if they are telepathic, or even intelligent. So this is why I believe that they are in fact a failed experiment, and the Quark with a distillation of these traits in a more useful package. If you add to this that Ork technology cannot be replicated as it works predominantly on psychic or Wa energy, then it can be seen how the lessons learnt in the formation of the Jacaro are perfected in the Krork. Orks can also innovate according to the size of their tribe or congregated numbers. The larger the group of Orks, the larger the war boss, the more exceptional the technology that is possible. This can be clearly shown in the confrontation with the Beast, as I mentioned earlier. When the Beast arose and gained the largest following since the Ullanor campaign, if not larger, then the technology displayed by the Orks was enough to smash the rules of physics with gusto. The attack moons of the era were transported across space, but not via the warp. It was technology akin to teleportation, but on a scale hitherto not even dreamt of. Also, the most important part of the argument for me is the power armor of the Krork in the collection of Trazine the Infinite. The power armor he wore was, and I quote, far in advance of any power armor presently used by the Imperium. The Jacaro travel in groups, but do not have the natural propensity or drive to enter combat that are so pronounced in the Orkoid race. I can see them as nothing more than the broken prototype of the Ork, or the Krork. The Knib and Rashan may not have been warrior races during the War in Heaven, but it seems incredibly likely that they were, as they rose at the same time as the others, and it is reported that they have their genesis from the Old Ones. In this case, one might also consider that these were also failures, and they did nothing to stop the Necron or Catan winning the war. But more than this, they have never been the level of threat that the Orks have been. The Eldar have definitely gone out of their way to keep the population of the Orks to levels where the Eldar would never be endangered by a return to their previous form, the Krork. But we shall get to the Eldar and their betrayals shortly. So, were the Knib another failed race, whose shortcomings were then correlated and catalogued, and led eventually to the development of the ultimate Old One's weapon, the Krork? In my mind there can be no doubt, but I always leave things open for changes. As things stand, I feel this is correct. But I shall continue. My most outlandish theory in this regard is about the Eldar themselves. There is scant information from this period, but one short description shows the Eldar being visited by the Old Ones, and that the Eldar felt less enamored with them with each visitation. As time went on, the Eldar thought very highly of themselves indeed, and less of their gods, the Old Ones. I think this actually indicates or contributes to the genesis of the Krork as well. The Jacaro again may be semi-psychers, and may communicate with each other telepathically. So there is no other explanation for their tribal activities if they cannot communicate. So the Eldar may have come later than the Jacaro, the Old Ones realizing that they can generate psychic attributes, and they were effective against the Catan and Necrons. But the Eldar thought too much, spent too much time on culture and then pride, and became disobedient. So they would certainly not be the ultimate weapon that the Old Ones wished. Who would take a pistol into a fight if they had to negotiate with it on the morality of firing, or the direction in which it was pointed, the target prioritization? Would you take a sword to a battle if you had to argue with it over who was more strong, you or it? Thus I feel the Eldar are not the ultimate weapon of the Old Ones as they claim. The Krork would not argue if their target involved a battle. The Krork have psyker abilities every bit as potent as the Eldar. In fact, I propose that the Krork were created simply because the Eldar are yet another failed experiment of the Old Ones. It would also explain their bruised ego. No being of worth has to constantly wave their own banner and proclaim their greatness if they know it is there. It smacks of a deep-seated insecurity. The insecurity of a child, replaced by a better sibling. And this runs through the later history. The Eldar lord nothing more than the defeat of the Quark and then Ork in all ways and means. But why such venom? Unless they have something to prove, why continue so much? Unless the person they wish to prove themselves to is no longer there. The Old Ones are gone. Like a child forever competing with their younger but infinitely superior sibling, the Eldar hate the Quark and Ork with a passion and zeal that only smacks of jealousy and the terrible realization that they were indeed replaced by the Quark, as they, the mighty Eldar, were seen by their parent as a failure. Thus Archimedes told me, thus have I relayed this. Under no duress whatsoever. None. Nope. I am not scared of Archimedes, and he is not, at this very moment, standing above me with a chopper. But let us continue. The lies of the Eldar, even unto themselves. The Eldar would paint a picture that they fought hard against the Necrons and Catan, and then, practically single-handedly by their accounts, they forced the beleaguered Necrons into the decision to go into stasis sleep. The Eldar state that the Necrons fled through time from them and their power. But does this bold claim match up to any of the details we have discussed, or our knowledge of the Necrons themselves? The Catan were beings of immense power, but their weakness was ever the powers of the warp, of psychers. The powers that the Eldar are so very versed in and universally accepted as being preeminent. So would not they have been the tool created by the Old Ones to counter the Catan, not the Necrons? Looking at a Necron army and their ways of war, massed formations inexorably marching forward and obliterating anything in their path with gauze or Tesla weaponry. When one falls, it is left behind to repair itself in minutes, if not seconds, then rejoin the last rank that is marching ever forwards. The Eldar expect us to believe that they were the ultimate weapon against such a force. Eldar are swift and nimble, but you cannot evade fire if you are being hosed by massed blocks of infantry. Nor can the Eldar be seen as immune to the weapons of the Necrons, despite what they may dream as being their illustrious past. If they advanced in numbers few enough for them to have the space to evade fire with their Eldar reflexes, then they would not have had the massed fire power to defeat the Necrons. It simply does not add up. The alternative take, which is my proposal, is that the Eldar have lied, by choice or by simple cultural senility and pride. The Eldar may well have had success against the Ingir, their name for the Catan, but the same Ingir were more interested with destroying each other when the Old Ones were then beaten. Only a Krork formation, in tight, precise, locked alignment, acting like a well-drilled weapon or machine, would have the power to meet the Necrons head-on and the endurance to grind them down. To the Krork losses mean nothing, as they do to the Ork of today. They are not that dissimilar. Only the Krork would have been able to wage the long wars of attrition that would have been required to finish a fully active and entrenched force of Necrons. Only the Krork would have made planetfall on a throne world and been absolutely massacred, only for their spores to take hold of the planet so the Necrons would never ever be free of them, grinding the Necron down bit by bit. Also, we have more evidence to back this postulation of mine for over a decade. The most recent Codex of the Necrons states categorically that the ultimate general of the Necrons, Imhotep the Stormlord, despises fighting orcs. He has a bad track record against them, as he cannot fathom them and cannot predict them. With his biggest advantage taken from him, Imhotep is vulnerable to orc activity. He hates them as well due to this. But if the greatest Necron strategist and general, possibly the greatest general the galaxy has ever seen according to the selfsame Codex, could not defeat the orcs convincingly, then how would his less able contemporaries fare? In the Codex we have the clearest indicant yet of the truth that the Eldar have tried to hide. The Necron's sleep was to avoid the rage and power of the Krork. The Eldar lies state that the Necron went to sleep to avoid them. The Necrons hint that they could simply sleep and the Enslaver Plague or the March of Time would defeat their enemies for them. As great scientists themselves, there is zero probability that the Necrons would not have investigated the Quark that they fought. Thus, is it not more likely that the Necrons would know that a lack of massed conflict would have made the Quark devolve or weaken at the very least? The Necrons would have known that captured Quark prevented from fighting would become lesser, would even die out. Thus Archimedes informs me that the Necrons basically turned tail and ran to bed to avoid the power of the Quark. The Eldar have done nothing more than steal the laurels that rightfully should be laid before the Quarks and their children, the Orks. Please bear in mind, when you may sneer, that a Krork, the one shown in Trajan's Palace of Collections, is over 12 meters tall. Its armor, as we have identified, is far more advanced than the Starties' power armor of even today. If we link this to the sizes of orcs that were leaders in the rise of the beast, one can only shudder at the power of an army of Krork on the move, and how the Eldar have hidden the matter, how they have lied. But more than this, I believe from my reading of the lore that they have done far worse than this. The Eldar have betrayed the Krorks thrice-fold over. And you must bear in mind that the Krork and Eldar were allies on the same side against the Catan and the Necrons, so they fought side by side. Also, there is note that the Krork were always bellicose and truculent, but did meet and coordinate with their fellow children of the Old Ones. So please bear in mind that the Krork were warriors the Eldar relied on, and had fought alongside. Now, let's rip back the curtain and reveal their worst atrocities. The ones they either like to hide or refute, or even go so bold as to pat themselves on the back for, entirely forgetting the past and their connections to the other children of the Old Ones. It is vile, and it is threefold. The three great betrayals of the Eldar. One of the major contributing factors to the fall of the Old Ones is stated to be that a plague of powerful psychic entities started breaching the gap between the immaterium and the materium, between the material realm and the warp. These were not demons, as we would know them today, but psychic entities nonetheless. They preyed on the Psykers, and none were more powerful than the Old Ones. This plague, plus the power of the Catan and the relentlessness of the Necron, finally ended them. But it did not end there. The Enslaver Plague decimated the other sentient races, all bar one. The Eldar. Yes, they took casualties and had to do something. But did they stand with their Krork brothers, or Knib, or Ashan, or Tukero, or any of the other children of the Old Ones? The most powerful Psykers of all of the races. In a word, no. The Eldar hid in the webway, into which the enslavers could not go, as it is neither the materium nor the immaterium. Only through the gates created by the Old Ones and taught to the Eldar could access to the webway be gained. They fled. Cowardly? Definitely. But did they extend their hidey hole to the other races? Did they herd the Krork, Knib, or Tukero into the webway, and safety also? The evidence is that this is a striking no. They allowed the Krork to take the worst of the damage, and saw their numbers dwindle rapidly. The time frames are always difficult to truly discern, if that is possible at all, but there are further reports from that age. The plague finally abated and the enslavers had ceased their attacks. Whether they starved through a lack of food or some other situation arose, it is unclear, but they did stop. It was then that the Krork attempted to rebuild and to begin to conquer the galaxy. The Krork were still one at that time, and still Krork, but something happened that led to an event known only as the Big Party. It is suspected that the huge wars to dominate the galaxy, although it may have been scarcely populated after the enslavers, went so far afield that the unity of the Quark was eventually eroded. As individual wars went further from the whole, differences in tactics and approaches finally developed. The Krork had lost unity. But what happened next is foul. The Krork are stated to have simply diverged and split, and then the main force of Krork, the clan known as the Blood Axes, was set upon by the other factions of the Krork and butchered. This faction, that was still organised and disciplined, and the epitome of martial power, was simply outnumbered and torn down. The unity of the Krork was smashed, and the sizes of the individual leaders of warbands would have been far less than the Krork, who led the whole unified race. Due to split war energy, they began their spiral into de-evolution. But there is also a rumour that the Krork civil war was not entirely internally generated. Even now there are rumours that other outside parties caused this rift and massacre, and led to the downfall of the entire race into a lesser entity. They did this as they could not face the Krork in open war and hope to win. If the Eldar are known for anything, that is not from their mouths and lies, of course, then it is deception and intrigue. I feel that the Eldar were definitely behind the breakup of the Krork nation and its subsequent civil war. Why? Because it is simply congruous with everything we know of the Eldar. It rings true. The last and longest betrayal. In codices aplenty and other writings, the Eldar state with satisfaction that they culled the Orks regularly, ferociously, frequently, and ardently. This may seem like attempted genocide, but it is clearly just an attempt to keep the Orks from ever gaining enough numbers and war energy to return to their true form, their true destiny, to be Quark. For with the Orks and the Krork, the only thing that truly matters are numbers, due to all of the bonuses and developments it allows. The Eldar have purposefully kept the Krork down, not because of their abhorrence, as they claim, but out of one simple little word: fear. Fear, and the jealousy of the prodigal son, like Joseph of the many-coloured cloak, they set upon the Krork out of envy of a sibling, loved more and lauded more by their parent. The Eldar fear the Krork as much as the Necrons do, for only those races from the War in Heaven know the truth of the birthright of the Ork, and the power of the Krork.
Humans is all weak scum that deserves to get stomped, except for one-eyed Eric. Who knows how to fight?
Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka. The lies of the humans. Most humans actually believe that the Imperium of Man covers the majority of the galaxy. They believe that the Xenos are only on the outskirts, the edges of the galaxy. They honestly believe that from one end of the Imperium to the opposite, that all is held and controlled by the power of their armies. No Xenos, mutant or heretic, is suffered to live. They believe that the will of the Orks was smashed at Alanor, and the greenskins have been a mere nuisance since. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is so deluded it is almost laughable. Let us simply look at the map. That huge cluster of green in the west, a stone's throw from Holy Terror, that is a huge and ancient Ork empire. An empire that the much vaunted Emperor of Mankind, when all of his Primarchs were loyal and each commanding an entire legion, could not or would not challenge. It stands today. The huge swathe of green slap bang in the middle of the Imperium. Another Ork empire the Imperium has not been able to clear or to control, and more and more. Each collection of green is where the Imperium has confirmed that there are high densities of Ork infestation, a euphemism for we cannot get rid of them. So much for the unstoppable legions of the Emperor and his myth of galactic control. More lies. Sad, pathetic lies told to the children to make them feel safe from the monster who is actually walking up the stairs. But what report on the Orks, what discussion would ever be complete without mention of Quark and Mork? The most powerful of gods, so mighty that they literally ignore the others due to their being beneath their notice. Even mighty Khorne, he speaks of blood, but that is the result of the combat, the repercussion. Quark and Mork love the fight itself. They are the real gods of war. He's just a sop who garners the outcome, not the act unto itself. Quark, the god of brutal cunning, and Mork, the god of cunning brutality. The only two gods that the Orks require. The gods Quark and Mork have taken absolutely no interest in the material planes, until recently it would seem. I like to think of it like this. Quark and Mork are fighting one day, as they did every day for millions and millions of years. One's brutal cunning matched the other's cunning brutality, so they fought on, as they always did. But today was different. It was Quark who raised his hand to his brother for the first time in a long time, and he staggered Mork by the simple action of it. Both were, for the first time in a long time, silent. Quark cupped his ear and bade Mork do the same, which, being a good brother, he did. After plunging a blade into Quark's unprotected belly, Quark laughed. Mork laughed. But they listened. The day had come at last. For Quark and Mork heard the tumult in the materium, and they smiled. For they had been having fun, of course, in their long battle, but they had only fought each other as there was simply nobody else worthy of their steel. And Quark and Mork did marvel. For now there were things aplenty again. For the chittering of the hive mind had stayed their hands and brought this respite. But it led to so much more. The iron creaks of the Necrons, their old enemy, arising. The shining light of the Astronomicon and the marching feet of the Starties and Militarum. The dazzling newness of the Tau. The rise of the four gods of chaos, who claimed a warrior amongst their lot. His worshippers seemed to know the joy of a good scrap. Well, sort of. And so Quark and Mork continued their battle, for their time was not yet ripe. But they acted, in small ways, in fun ways, in cunning ways. And by their ways was Ghazghkull raised, and by their ways was he given visions of magnificence. And by their ways was he saved from his enemies and delivered, the ability to traverse the galaxy at a whim. And by their ways is he elevated, evolving, returning the Orks to their birthright, to be Krork again. Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka has been blessed by Quark and Mork, and now calls himself their prophet. He now appears all over the galaxy, has had strange events protecting him, and plucking him out of time and space when he is in danger, and depositing him back into real space. But always near Orks. Safety. Quark and Mork have big plans for Ghazghkull. But he is now in command of the majority of the empires of the Ork races, the far-flung stars. He is now in charge of billions of Orks. Ghazghkull is becoming a Krork in my mind, and the entire galaxy had better say, thank Quark and Mork. If he does ascend to that state of being, then all of the Orks he comes into contact with will grow in size, aggression, and abilities. He may only need to be in system, not even landing on a planet, for this effect to be transmitted through the Wa field of his race. This same effect occurred during the rise of the Beast, and the recorded Orks in that Wa were considerably larger than normal Orks. If Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka does wrestle control of every Ork kingdom and planet in the galaxy, then he will most assuredly evolve back into that sublime state of being. For his ascension and the return of the Krork could mean their utter domination of the galaxy, but perhaps better to be the slave, even of a Krork regime, than to watch the entire galaxy be eaten by the Great Devourer, one system at a time, until nothing whatsoever is left. The simple hidden truth about the Orks is that they have always had greatness and domination hardwired into their minds and coursing through their veins. They have been quired by their standards, and almost in a state of abeyance. Why? Very simple. Without the eternal war against the Necrons, without a proper enemy to fight, they were never ever in danger of their lives or existence. Even during the most vicious of Eldar culls, the likelihood of the Orks getting a proper fight was negligible. Hence they existed, waiting, mainly fighting one another due to there being nobody and nothing truly worth of their abilities. For what Ork would go into a war with someone without some real crumping and fun involved? So, as a race, they slept and had fun. With the resurrection of the Necrons, the invasion of Chaos, and the attack of the High Fleets, finally, the Orks will come out of their slumber as well. Finally, they will throw off their comedic element and become what they always were. The very antibodies of the Milky Way galaxy, its greatest defenders, and its most powerful soldiers. Thank Gork and Walk, and hail the Krork, and be prepared for the war to end all wars. Was that good enough? Orky means?
Yeah. I only got one thing to say to that, human. Wow!